Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hernan's English podcast. Today we have a special guest. We have teacher Emma with us. All right, so here she
Hello.
is from Seattle. From Seattle, five hours, 8 hours difference actually.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
8 hours
Yeah.
difference. Five with Colombia, six with Colombia, five with Florida, one with Spain behind actually. So yes, here we are with teacher Emma. You can follow her on Instagram. We are also on TikTok. We are also on Instagram at the same time, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and then we'll be on a different time on Emma's YouTube channel, right, Emma?
That's right. In the future, I will be posting this.
All right, Emma. So let's get this started. Thanks everyone for tuning in. So, Emma, can you tell us about the moment you knew you wanted to become an English teacher? Why becoming an English teacher? If you were
Yeah,
born
it's a good
in
question.
the States, you grew up in the States, you have no need of teaching English. Why an English teacher?
Right. So, first of all, I always wanted to be a teacher since I was a young girl. I love teaching. I have four younger siblings, so I just always taught them whatever I learned in school. So I always had this drive to be a teacher. But when I went to university and started studying languages, I studied Spanish and Portuguese, I realized that I love language and that, yeah, I have this love for language. I grew up around Spanish speakers. So you might think, hey, you live in the US, the official language is English. Why do you need to teach English? But most people know that there's a very large Latino population here, people who don't speak English at all and have lived here for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, right? So there is a need for English teachers here, and especially English teachers who understand Spanish and can speak Spanish and communicate and empathize with
We
people
would
coming
get
from.
we would get into that. How
Yeah,
is it? How important is it for the teacher to know Spanish? If
exactly.
you're
Right.
addressing Spanish speakers, that's very important. All right, Emma. So yes, I totally agree. There would be a need for teachers to live in America, obviously. But I just never thought of like you were born in America, you grew up in America, and then why to become an English teacher? Apart from it, you
Right.
could have been, I don't know, being a PE teacher, whatever, if you wanted to
Right.
teach. But now I
Yeah.
understand that you love languages.
Right. I really wanted to start out as a Spanish teacher, and I teach Spanish as well. But I moved, so really the first opportunity, the first gig that I got teaching English was in Spain when I moved there 3 years ago.
All
So I
right.
started teaching English there, and I realized I like it. And yeah, then from there, I've just been teaching English now online with private students through my podcast as well, creating content, right? It's another way of teaching.
Yes.
So yeah,
And that's a way of sharing, free content and adding
exactly.
a bit of applause that all communities need. All right, Emma, can you describe the journey that led you to establish at EM language? How
Yeah.
did is it like a is it established academy? What is it? EM language.
Yes, M Languages is actually my online language academy. It is established completely online. So there we give group classes, we give private classes, and also language learning materials to support students. So thank you for sharing that. So my Instagram page is where I share free content, right? And then with my online language academy, it's where students can have that personalized help and that personalized support from a teacher.
All right, all right. So you have so you work with different teachers, I suppose. You have a group of teachers, and
Yeah, for
do
now,
you?
I'm the main teacher, and I do have a girl helping me as well, Aaliyah. Aaliyah, if you're out there, I appreciate you. She helps me with classes as well.
Oh, very good, very good, very good. A bit similar to my academy. I also have a teacher Lucho, and he helps me a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's also American accent. Unlike me,
Good.
that I lost my American accent. I lived in the States as well. I lived in Illinois. That's where I
Yeah,
grew up, and I did my junior high school there, and yeah, so I had a bit of their accent, but then I came to Ireland, and I suppose it's gone.
I can hear that. No, I can hear that little Irish touch to it.
All right, all
It's
right.
a beautiful accent.
Oh, thanks, thanks, thanks. Yeah, it's a bit different though, but look, I love
Yeah.
it. Like I've lived in the UK as well, and out of the three accents, I think I feel really comfortable with the Irish one. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of listening, like obviously I'm not saying that I've picked it up yet. I don't know if I've picked it up. You never notice it,
You have. You
but yeah.
definitely have. I can hear the touch to it. Yeah. It's neutral, right? It's very understandable, but there's a little bit of that Irish intonation.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right. Good to know that. All
Yeah.
right, Emma. How did your own experiences learning languages shape your teaching style and methods? I mean, like, I suppose that's why I'm one of them that agrees that if you're going to teach English or any language, you must be bilingual at least, because
Hmm.
that helps understanding, the process that everybody has to overcome in
Right.
order to learn a language. So how did you speak three languages, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that impact your teaching methods?
Right. So I think that a big part of this is for me having contact with the language in all aspects. So I will never show up to a class and just read a grammar from a notebook or from a textbook. I think that we need to have conversation. We need to learn real life phrases, real life idioms, and that can only be learned through, of course, through preparation of materials, but also through conversation. So always I try to have a really big focus on conversation practice. And for students who can't carry a conversation quite yet, I always recommend them to listen to podcasts like this podcast, your podcast, my podcast, just to start learning. Because truly, I learned languages through input. I watched series, I watched movies, I grew up watching novelas, right, with my family. So that's why I learned Spanish so quickly because Spanish was in my brain. But in order to get it out, I really needed that support from a classroom environment. But I always tell my students, you need to have contact with English and reading, writing, listening, speaking, conversation, all of it. You can't just read from a notebook or a grammar book and think you'll learn English. And I think that's where a
100%.
lot of teachers fail in teaching, probably monolingual teachers,
Yes,
because they think that you can just read a book and learn a language, and that's not it.
that's
It's
not it.
much more, it's a complete picture.
It's an everyday input
Exactly.
anyway. Like I tell to my students, like, look, you're not going to learn English. My courses now, they are the frequencies is twice a week. So we
Mhm.
have 4 hours, taught lessons, and then we also have material for them to do at home. But if you only practice in English the 4 hours a week, that's not gonna work. Like it's
Right.
not gonna happen. It's not
Absolutely.
going
Yeah.
to happen. No.
Right. And
We
I
have
follow the same. You have a
sorry,
question?
we have a question here for you. Jacqueline Liranzo, she's from Dominican Republic. Thanks for
Uh-huh.
tuning in, Jacqueline, as always. Are you from Seattle? The English is English your first language? So
Yes, I am from Seattle, Washington, born and raised in Seattle. And yes, English is my first language. However, I grew up in a predominantly Latino community. My neighborhood, my neighbors, my family is half Mexican. So I also had a lot of contact with Spanish.
very good. There you go,
Yes.
Jacqueline. There you go. Just to before we go on to the next topic, Emma. So, what are your thoughts about the comprehensible input from Stephen Krashen? I suppose you are familiar with his theory. What are your thoughts about it? That's
Right.
you just touched on it, I suppose, on your last intervention. So, what are your thoughts
Right.
on it?
Right. I can say that I think comprehensible input is completely necessary. That's, as I said, that's how I learned Spanish and Portuguese by listening to YouTube channels, podcasts, right? Music is a big one too, just having contact daily. But I think that's not the only way to learn a language. You need to have the output. You really do need practice. And that's where classes with someone like you or me would offer that classroom environment for conversation practice. But comprehensible input is a really big piece of the puzzle of learning a language.
100%, 100%. What do you answer? I don't know. Maybe you can give me ideas there because every time I explain what how comprehensible input is, they always come up to me and they say, "What if I don't understand anything? What would be my motivation if I'm trying to listen to a podcast, but I understand zero, nothing?"
Yeah,
So how can we explain to them that it doesn't matter? I always try to relate the situation to when you were babies, when we were babies, sorry. Like we didn't understand anything, but there we were trying to repeat and trying to copy
exactly. Right.
everybody's behavior. So what are your thoughts on that? If you don't get
Hmm.
anything, why would
Yeah.
you keep on listening to it?
Right. So my point here is that with time, you will understand more and more. And don't worry about understanding every single word. Understand the context. You don't need to understand every single word. And also, of course, every little contact with English will help. But if you notice that a podcast is too difficult for you, find something easier and something at your level so that you don't feel frustrated. Because it's a frustrating listening to a 30-minute podcast and I don't understand anything. Anyone can get frustrated. So listen to something easier or try 10 minutes, right? Try something more practical.
Very good. Very good. That's a good advice there. All right. English idioms. That's the rock on the shoe, right? English idioms can often be confusing for learners, but also for teachers, especially if you're not
Hmm.
native or if you don't live in an English speaking country. How do you deal with English idioms? Both
Yeah.
when I came to Ireland, they have lots of idioms here that are not common in America, for example, where I
Yeah.
first learned English. Same if you go to the UK. So that's what I when they say I want to be native, I'm like, you can't be native. If you're not native, you're just not native. Because
Yeah.
for example, you can pick up a really good pronunciation, but idioms you have to live there in order to pick them up. So how do you
Absolutely.
deal with them?
Right. The point here is exactly what you're saying. I think in order to really have a lot of idioms and use a lot of idioms, likely you need to spend some time in an English speaking country. That's a must. But I think on the other hand, this goes back to comprehensible input. Watch series, watch TV shows, right? Expose yourself to the language, to the culture. And I think all of this is related. Like idioms come from the content that you find on YouTube from native speakers, the content that you find on Instagram, the content that you find on Netflix. All of this is a way, they're tools. If you look at it, it's tools to learn idioms, to learn words, and to understand the flow of the language.
Very good, 100%. Do you have any examples? I don't know. Do you have any idioms that are common in Seattle, for example, are not common in, I don't know, Chicago? Do you have any idioms you can pass on to us?
Right. So I'm going to give you one here that is related to the Seattle culture. So here in Seattle, in Washington State, we have so many mountains and people love hiking, right? Hiking, trekking up the mountains. So one idiom that we have when we want to tell someone to leave us alone or to go away, we can say, go take a hike. Go take a hike. Like, go away. Just go. I don't want to talk to you. Go take a hike. Yeah.
All right, that's very similar. We have one in Colombia, and it's exactly the same context. But in Colombia, it's vaya mire si la gallina puso huevos. Like go check. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Vaya mire, and it's very common with with kids because they would actually go and check
Yeah.
if the chicken you know yeah.
Definitely.
All right,
Yeah, here
very
it's
good.
very sarcastic. It's a sarcastic idiom. We might be, go take a hike, right? But in a sarcastic tone.
Oh, I have to acknowledge that is my first time listening to that idiom. All right,
Oh,
very
there
good.
you go.
What would be your advice then for people to learn idioms besides using series, TV shows, whatever? Is it good? I don't like. I'm not really into memorizing them, so that's not my advice. But what are your thoughts? How can
Right.
you quickly learn English? Like if you go on YouTube, you'll find videos with 200 idioms. I found last time I found a video with 200 idioms, and it's like a 45-minute video, and then
No. Yeah.
if it has lots of views, plays, thousands of views, thousands of likes, but does that really help?
Right. Right, but being a teacher, you know that this is not the way to truthfully memorize and learn idioms. I would not recommend memorization. My goal here would be to take note of a few idioms that you think are useful for your life, right? That are useful for you. So take note of those. And when you are talking to someone, right? If you have a conversation partner with your English teacher, have your notebook there and try intentionally to use those idioms in your conversation. I think the best way is actually putting what you learn into practice. So, my first tip, take note of idioms that are truthfully useful to you and then try to use them in conversation.
Very good, very good. That's 100%. Like I always do it with out of the blue because that one is very common. When something
Yes.
happens spontaneously, you say, "Oh, it happened out of the blue." You know, it came out of the blue, like out of nowhere. So I always tell them like that's a very common one. You
Mhm.
can just even if you don't know, if you're not speaking English, like you can be speaking Spanish and oh, ¿qué pasó aquí? That came out of the blue. You know, like you can
Yeah,
mix
that's
languages.
true. Yeah,
That's Spanglish. I mean, like at the start, I think it's good to mix them because you're using them and you're doing.
absolutely.
There is a process going on in your
Yeah,
brain. Like if you do it, what would
yeah,
not be good is to stay doing it. You know, like to keep on
right,
doing it all the time. All right,
right.
Emma, very good. Do you have any other favorite idioms that you want to share with us? Like especially the common ones. Like we went to the one through the one about Seattle. That would be very common in
Mhm.
Seattle, but it's kind of beside the point here in Ireland, for example.
Sure. Right,
But
maybe in Ireland. In the rest of the US, you can say it. Yeah, we have many, right? I mean, one that comes to my head too would be for relax, telling someone to calm down, relax.
okay,
We might say chill out or take a chill pill, right? Calm down. This word chill.
okay, all right, very good, very good.
That's a common one.
In Ireland we have the what's the crack, and basically they use it for everything. You know, like oh, what's the crack? No crack. Like what's crack is like what's happening, like what's popping. Yeah. So no, yeah.
Yeah.
Is
We
there
might
any?
say what's up?
Yeah,
Here,
yeah,
what's up?
that would be
Yeah,
the equivalent 100%.
the American
But
one.
then in Ireland we use it for everything. Like is there any crack? You know, is there any crack? Like is there something to do? Like, but yeah, it's very common in here, and you'll be using it like every day.
Yeah, interesting. Very
Yes,
interesting.
yes, yes. All right, how do you approach teaching pronunciation? That's
Hmm.
I don't like to teach pronunciation, especially because I'm not a native speaker. So I 100% have to acknowledge that I am fluent enough, you know, like I have a C2, hopefully still have a C2 because them tests they expire every 2 years. So my last time I did one was actually in throughout COVID-19 because I went for a scholarship, a PhD scholarship here, and I had to do it. So yes, but I'm not a native speaker, so I don't focus on pronunciation because nobody taught pronunciation to me.
Yeah, right.
And I've done a bit of research, and according to my results is that I've asked the same question to English speakers, non-native English speakers or bilingual speakers, and they all agree on the same thing. Nobody taught pronunciation to them, and if
Yeah.
somebody taught pronunciation to them, it didn't work. Like you know, you don't
Hmm.
the pronunciation you have is not because of X or Y teaching you pronunciation. So
Hmm.
how do you deal with this?
Right. For me, pronunciation, I think it's important to know how to pronounce words correctly because you know this, right? English speakers often don't understand people if things aren't pronounced the correct way. It's something about the language. We have so many words that are written similarly but pronounced differently. So I think the pronunciation's a big key here. For me, I always in every class starting off, I do a pronunciation warm up. So I would do something like pronouncing some contractions because here in the US, probably in Ireland
Oh
as well,
yes.
you have a lot of contractions.
Oh
So,
yes.
yeah, I would start off doing, okay, let's practice some contractions. Let's do a tongue twister. right? Let's pronounce these difficult words, difficult sounds. Most of my students are Spanish speakers. So the words that they struggle with would be words with th, or the y. Sometimes they confuse the y with j,
With
la
yeah,
jota, j.
with yeah.
So because I speak Spanish, I understand why they make those sounds, and I can explain you need to be pronouncing that y here and not here, right? So that's the advantage that I think speaking Spanish gives, is because I understand why they make these noises, and I can explain, look, this is how the noise, the sound is made in English, right? But for me, I think it's something that's acquired naturally and with practice.
Yes, 100%. I totally agree. I think we do it the same way. I also take advantage of Spanish, and I say, look, and I always give the same example. When you're speaking Spanish, when you're typing Spanish through WhatsApp, the ha ha ha. You go in English, you go H-A-H-A-H-A,
Right.
but in Spanish you go J-A-J-A-J-A. So I tell to them, I'm like, that's the reason why if you're chatting to an English speaker, he would go H-H-A-H-A-H-A
Yeah, exactly.
instead of the ha ha ha. And and
Yeah.
and and I always tell them in the exact same thing. But do you go with repetition, for example? Do you do repetition
Yes, for sure.
repetition
Right.
exercises?
Repetitions, one time slowly, one time quickly, one time slowly, one time quickly, right? And then obviously I would listen back to them, see how they're pronouncing it, and see what mistakes they're making or what's going on in the word. What sound do we need to change to where that they could pronounce that word in an understandable way?
All right, very good, very good. So there we have some advice from Emma in order to learn pronunciation. And the last piece about pronunciation, Emma, if they have no one to work with, if they have no teachers, no one to give them advice, how can they learn pronunciation?
Yeah. How It's a good question, and there are many resources out there for this. So first of all, going back to using the resources that you do have, watch a YouTube video and try to repeat and record yourself, listen back to it, and listen. Does it sound the same or similar to that series? So I would definitely use recording and listening back. And, I'm sure you're probably aware of Pingo Learn. Pingo Learn
Yes.
is a really great resource because it has speaking lessons where you record yourself reading a text, and it will give you a percentage, a grade, and tell you what words you're pronouncing wrong and how you can improve. So Pingo Learn is a really good app for pronunciation.
How about shadowing technique? Are you familiar with the shadowing technique?
Shadowing. I've heard of it before, but I can't say that I'm super familiar with it.
All right. So it's basically it's a technique in which you listen, and whatever you're listening to, you're reading it at the same time, and hopefully reading it aloud. Out loud, and that way you'll be like doing that contrast. How do I sound similar to the
Yeah.
whoever is on the listening on the audio?
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Absolutely.
agree with that one? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I would take it to the next level and record what I'm reading and again compare and see how does my pronunciation really sound.
Very good. And in your view, like this would be in your view, how does pronunciation influence the overall language learning journey? Like, um, is it really that important? Is it? I mean, like, would people have to avoid the output just because they don't have the right pronunciation?
No,
Okay.
of course not. Of course not. And also, you learn and improve your pronunciation with output and with practice. But I think the most important thing in any language is making sure that people understand you and that you understand people. Think about how many diverse accents there are in the English speaking world. We don't pronounce things all the same.
Yeah.
So, why would a non native speaker have to pronounce perfectly? As long as they're understandable, I think that's what's most important. Going back to it, I do think it's important to practice and learn pronunciation because, again, a lot of native speakers who don't know Spanish aren't aware of these sounds and won't be able to understand when someone has a pronunciation that's not correct, right? So the key
Especially
here is to be understand it.
Yes,
Understood, I should say.
understood, understood. Yes, especially
Understood.
the minimal pairs. Oh,
Yeah, right.
they're a headache. They're a pain in the butt. Talking about
They
idioms.
are.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are.
The minimal pairs, especially the long I, the long e. Yeah, it's that
Right.
I do really give an emphasis on them because, I mean, like you can end up saying a totally different thing. Like it's not the same if you say pitch, which is like here a pitch is a soccer field. So
Okay. Yeah.
that's a difference between American English and Irish or English, because over here
Right.
you won't say the soccer field or the rugby field or whatever. You just say I'm going to the pitch to play some football.
Okay.
You don't say soccer either. You say football, and then peach, which is the fruit.
Peach. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to make the long and you yeah.
Exactly. Right. Right. And
I'd
these
say
are
the
details
minimal
that
pairs.
I think if someone's goal is to really improve their pronunciation, it would be good to find a tutor, find a teacher to really help you with that, if that's your ultimate goal. But I think for any language learner, the goal is to be understood.
Yes, to communicate. Communication is the key.
Exactly.
I
Communication.
always I always say to them, if you ask a question and the answer you're getting is whatever you're expecting, then you made it. And
Right.
from then on,
Absolutely.
you just have to improve and try to make it better every day and always
Exactly.
be an active listener, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean always listen like a learner. Don't keep in mind that you're learning. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're an active listener, you'll be able to do the contrast. Oh, if I were saying that words, I would have said different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be that's just my advice.
A
Emma,
good
what
tip.
advice can you give learners who find it hard to understand native English speakers?
Yeah.
Because especially because of the pronunciation, they learn,
I
so
know.
they're
Yeah.
learning with Emma, they're learning with American accent, obviously, and then they come here to Northern Ireland, to Belfast, which is a different accent from Dublin.
Yeah.
And and actually a friend of mine came last year, and she came to Belfast. It was her first time out of, well, she lives in Colombia, but it was her first time in an English speaking country different than America.
Right.
And she's an English teacher as well. I mean, she's been teaching for 15 years, and she found it hard. I mean, like
Yeah.
she found it hard to understand the accent in
Right.
Belfast,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is really is different. It's
Yeah.
just different.
Yeah.
So
Even I struggle with the Irish accent sometimes. I have to be honest. There's so many accents that it's hard for even native speakers to understand other dialects. That's completely normal. So my tip here is be patient with yourself and don't be afraid to ask someone to repeat themselves or to slow down. Just,
perfect.
hey, I'm learning English. Can you just say that a little bit slower or speak more slowly? That's all it is. It's having that confidence and that trust to say, hey, I'm a language learner. I'm accepting the process. Let's slow down. Apart from studying and exposing yourself to the language, having contact with the language, comprehensible input, be able to say, hey, can you please speak more slowly? I'm a learner.
Perfect, 100%. I totally agree. Another question, Emma. I think my own experience. I think that your goals with the language are very important if you relate them to your study plan. Okay, so because, for example, I got a student last week, and she's an engineer. So she's living in the States for the past 2 months, and she wants to get a qualified job.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, her goals are totally different from a person that just wants to go and visit the States and stay there for 3 months, 3 weeks, whatever, as a tourist, and go back to their country. Or
Mm-hmm.
from a person that just wants to get any job, but not a qualified job, in which she would have to write in English, papers in English, reports, whatever. So, what is your advice for people to plan their study plan? How would
Yes.
you, if you had a student from scratch, another idiom, if you had a student from scratch, what would be your advice?
Right. I would say see what's realistic for you, right? I mean, how often should you be studying? When do you need to have this certain level of English, right? And what's realistic? So, if you have enough time to study every single day to get a certain job, because obviously you need a certain level to be a qualified worker in English, right? So, what's realistic for you? Especially you said starting from scratch. That's going to be a long process, right? And focus on the language that is going to be useful for you in that job or in that opportunity that you're looking for, right? Know the language, know the lingo, know the words and phrases that you need in that job to get through the interview and to get, of course, this opportunity. But also make sure that you're exposing yourself, on the other hand, to just the normal communication, daily communication with native speakers. And if you don't try to do it all on your own, there's so many people out there that will help you, teachers that will help you figure this out and achieve your goals quicker. Find someone to help you and to guide you through this process, because it's an investment that's worth it.
Very good. There you go. What can we do with this, with these teachers that promise that you would be a native speaker in 3 months? That's,
Know
I
that they're
really
lying.
struggle. I really struggle when they ask me about it, because like they're really, they assure it, and they say that if money, they say that if it's not achievable, then they'll give the money back, which I don't know if they
Mhm.
do. But what is your advice there for, because we do get these messages every day, when I tell them that the process will take them at least, like, average at least a year to be from A1 to B2.
Fluent.
Yeah,
Exactly.
to be fluent. I say
Right.
fluent is B1 already. I mean, if you
Hmm.
make it to B1, then you can drive on.
Right.
But what is your advice? I mean, like, being
Yeah.
native in 3 months. I mean, I've been speaking English for
No.
the last 22 years, and I'm still not native.
Absolutely.
It's
And
been
you're
20.
living, yeah,
I'm
living in an
32.
English-speaking country.
Yeah, I'm 32, and I was born in Colombia, as I said, but I moved to the States when I was 10, and since I speak English, and I'm still not native, and I'm not hoping to be native. Like, I love my Spanish, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, like, I don't know. What is your advice? I mean, like, I don't want to. I'm speechless there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough because there are teachers who truthfully and honestly do promise you'll be fluent in 3 months after this course. Understand that fluency is a lifelong thing, a lifelong goal to achieve in language learning. It's not something that's going to happen even in a year, right? I would say fluency is B1 too, where you can communicate, but that's something that is achieved after months. For me, I would say it's going to take about 2 to 3 months to improve at each level, right? A1 to, for example, A0 to A1, A1 to A2. Just jumping those levels is going to be about 2 to 3 months or more. So understand that this is a process for, if you want fluency and you want to be native, a lifetime. It's not something, think, and it goes back to what you were saying. Think about how children acquire language. Children 2, 3, 4 years old can speak but not fluently, and they're exposed to that language for years and years until they can really learn how to speak fluently, right? And it's the same thing with language learners.
100%. I also think it's a life thing. It's a life.
Yeah.
It has to be a life plan. It has to
Right.
be a life plan.
Absolutely.
100%. All right. Let's move on to listening skills. We have like 10 or 15 minutes left.
Hmm.
So, how can one improve their listening skills to better understand different English accents?
Yeah. Right. This is, for me, this is the easiest one to improve because there's so much material out there. Go listen to Hernan's podcast, listen to my podcast, listen to a YouTube videos, one a day for 10 or 15 minutes. Watch a series. And as you said, in different accents. If your goal is to learn different accents, watch a show from Ireland, watch a video from an American person, right? Expose yourself to these different accents. But to me, listening is the easiest one. And back to what you said earlier, active listening. Practicing active listening, making sure that you're repeating and keeping in mind that you're a learner and that you're going to need to have a notebook with you taking notes, right? It's an active process. It's not just like sitting and watching a show in our native language where we kind of go off into another world, right? Here we need to be focused. Okay, I'm
All
going to
right.
take notes, I'm going to repeat and really learn from this.
Very good, 100%. So Leo Andres is asking, good afternoon, excuse me. I'm sorry for the question. Do you teach English online? Yes, we do. Yes,
Yep.
yes. So I am at El Profesor Hernan, and then Emma, it's
At
language
M
here. You got it.
language. That's right.
So you can get in
Yes.
touch with either of us,
Yeah.
and of course, we'll help you to achieve your goals. All right,
Yep.
Emma. Very good. Yeah. How about the news? Do you? My recommendation sometimes is to, if they're on politics, for example, if they're,
Right.
and whatever, because the news, you would find some of the, high frequency words on the
Yes.
news. So
Right.
I always tell them, you can download the app for whatever radio station it is. Like over here we have the news talk. So that's, if you want to learn, if you want to pick up some of the Irish accents, you can listen to the news talk, and you will see
Sure.
how, yeah, it's like the biggest radio station here, and they'll be interviewing people every day,
Mm-hmm.
politicians, and
Yeah.
lots of people. So what are your thoughts about the news, in order to learn, to improve your listening
Yeah.
skills?
I think it's another tool. It's another tool. If you're interested in politics and if you want to learn this language, it's a useful tool. Why not?
Okay, we have Jacqueline again. Recommendation or an advice for to improve my English level B1. Teacher, I suppose she was saying teacher Hernan and teacher Emma.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, in order to improve a level B1, Jacqueline, I'd say just maximize your input. I'd say
Yeah.
2 hours at least every day, 2 hours at least, and try to find an English partner.
Yeah.
Like, you are on my WhatsApp group, Jacqueline. So there you would definitely improve, because you have lots of people to practice with. So I'd
Absolutely.
say my only recommendation is, don't focus on grammar. Like, don't try to leave grammar on the side. It's important, but grammar, you'll pick it up, right? You
Right.
will pick up the grammar if you
Mhm.
improve the input. I don't know what are Emma's thoughts.
Yeah. No, I second everything that you say. I agree with you on everything. I think having more input, more contact with listening, finding someone to practice with is fundamental as much as you can, whatever's realistic to you. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week, right? That's perfect. And yeah, I would say those two things.
Perfect. And we have the last one here. I understand everything, but I can't speak. That's very common. I say,
Yeah.
if you can understand everything, you have enough language in your brain in order to speak. So if you
Yeah.
can't speak, that's your mind. I
Mm-hmm.
I I always I really focus on your emotional intelligence in this one,
Definitely.
because it's just, you just have to overcome the fear. If you
Right.
if you don't overcome fears, then it's a bit hard. It's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. I know it's a challenge, but what are your thoughts there, Emma?
Yeah. So part of this is fears, the emotions, it's the mental block, the insecurities, right, that we have speaking a second language. But part of this makes me wonder, how are you studying English? Are you only listening? Are you only listening, doing input, comprehensible input, and not practicing in a classroom setting or practicing with a language partner? So in that case, I would say keep consuming content in English, but find more opportunities to practice your speaking.
Okay, very good. I don't see any more questions. That one was from TikTok. I don't see anything on Instagram.
Yeah,
All right, Emma. I have another one here. Speaking of a learning
perfect.
routine, can you share some methods that have worked best for your students?
Yeah.
um I would start with some ideas. I always tell them, like, my advice is to dedicate at least 2 hours every day. But when you think about 2 hours every day, that's a bit tough. So what I say is, why don't you design a routine in which you'll be I don't know, studying or whatever, exposed to the language, half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, and half an hour in the evening, and then throughout the day you are speaking or texting or whatever with a partner, and
Yeah.
that way you'll be like attaining the 2 hours. Because
Yes.
obviously if you're thinking about sitting down and studying English for 2 hours every day, that's going to be a bit tough, especially if you have a
Right.
busy day. So what are some routines that have worked for you?
Yes. So for me, something that I do with my students is we have actually a platform where I design our materials in chunks to do every day. So, day one, you're going to focus on studying vocabulary. And then day two, you're going to read an article. Day three, listen to these videos and answer these questions. So, I would say have a goal every day of how you want to expose yourself to the language, right? For example, like what you said, in the morning, listen to a podcast, 30 minutes. There's 30 minutes of exposure. In the afternoon, I'm going to sit down and study vocabulary in English and take notes and answer questions and write example sentences. And then at night, watch a video or watch an episode in English. Then the next day, my goal can be today I'm going to practice my writing skills in English. So do the same thing. Listen to a podcast episode in the morning, then maybe journal in English. Write, do a writing activity in English, and at night, watch an episode of your favorite series in English. Right? The next day, read an article in English and do the same thing. Right? Be intentional about how you're going to practice English every day.
100%, yes, 100%. I always tell them, look, if you do 30 minutes of listening every day, then that would come up to 900 minutes a month. And then when
Right?
you divide that by 60, that would be 15 hours nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Right?
15 hours, that's a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do it every day, 30 minutes. And as Emma said before, it's not about sitting down and doing and taking, I don't know, listening mocks. No, it's not about that. It's just watching a series, watching a movie, listening to music, something, but do it in English. And that way you would definitely achieve that fluency in 3 months,
Right.
like some
Yeah.
teachers recommend.
I would say all of the content that you consume in your native language, if you like watching movies and you want to watch it in your native language, think no. I'm taking this opportunity to practice English. Let's watch an English movie. Let's watch an English series. Try to do everything in English if that's your true goal to become fluent in English.
Yes, very good, very good. All right, I had another question for you, but I think that one was answered already, and it's about what would be an ideal day of language learning for you, like in your opinion. But I think that's been answered already. It's
Yeah.
just including a daily routine. Hopefully,
Chunks.
yeah, chunks as Emma says, and hopefully, a morning piece after breakfast, an afternoon piece.
Exactly.
An evening piece, and I'm pretty sure that would help. Sunday to Sunday, because you speak Spanish or whatever your mother language is every day. So if you want to learn English, why would it be different? It
Yep.
won't be different. If you want to learn English because you want to live in an English speaking country, then you would end up speaking English every day. So
Mm-hmm.
don't pretend to study English twice a week and then live in English.
Right.
That's not gonna
Exactly.
happen. Okay, Emma, we have some a section here that we call it controversial questions. So,
Oh
number one,
no.
do you believe that English is becoming too dominant globally, potentially going over other languages? Taking over other languages.
I do, yeah.
I had a
I
different
think
word, like
so.
endangering other languages, putting other languages in danger. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that one?
Right. To me, this is a clear yes, because English is becoming a universal language. And what happens when a language becomes a universal language is that everyone wants to study and probably needs to study, right? If you want a really good job, you probably need a little bit of English skills nowadays. So people are pretty much forced to learn this universal language. And along with that piece, which is great because then now there's a language where everyone can understand each other languages, as you said, become endangered or less in use. I mean, what happens in Ireland? Irish people have their own language, right?
Yes, it's really hard, like really, really hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, very good, very good. Some people argue that English language teaching is only for Europeans or Americans, and by Europeans I mean
British
English,
people, English
British
people
people.
from
Yeah,
UK.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that people in Latin America, for example, shouldn't be teaching English?
I do not agree with that. I do not agree. And I will say I don't agree because there are people who have C2 level, great fluency, and who have actually studied English from the bottom up, from the roots, right? The grammar, all of those little parts that a language contains. And maybe they can explain better than a native speaker. I think that people who study a language from the bottom up and can achieve fluency maybe can even explain a language better because they had to learn it firsthand. That's my take.
Okay, very good. And this is not the last one, but it's the second last one. Do you think that technology could eventually replace teachers in language learning? Talking about ChatGPT, for example. I don't know if you've met Luz on your WhatsApp. Have you met her?
No.
All right.
Oh, AI probably, yeah? An AI
Yes,
chat?
yes, the Luz one, Luz.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on this one? Do you think that we're going to be replaced?
This is tough. I think that people will lose their jobs. Probably people who are not very dedicated or very good teachers who don't do this from their heart and from passion, maybe they won't have an opportunity. I think a lot of students want to learn a language but connect with the teacher who's teaching them. And that teacher's a support system. And that teacher's an emotional support a lot of times, right? We've even talked about those insecurities, those emotions, and those fears that come up. I don't think an AI bot can replace that empathy, that compassion
Not,
that a
not a
teacher has with their
chance.
students.
100%. I but
Yeah.
but at the end of the road, it's not what we think; is what they think as learners. But yeah, I totally agree with you. 100%.
Yes.
I do think that we have to use these tools. Like, yeah,
Yes.
I use ChatGPT
Absolutely.
every day. Like, and I
Me
use
too.
and I even show it to my students. Like, I did an intense course last week, a 4 days course, and a 4 day course, and I showed them, ChatGPT, but I also show them, sorry, the other one, that Luz or Luz,
Hmm.
whatever you prefer, the Spanish Z or the Latin American
Uh-huh.
Z. All right, and the last one. When you look for English teaching jobs, you would see that under requirements they ask for an English-speaking country passport. So if you go on TEFL.com, for example, and you look at the requirements, it says that one of the requirements is for the teacher to be native, and then the second requirement is for the teacher to have an English speaking country passport. But then when they write down the countries, they only include like 8 countries. So they would go on about United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, um, and the whole United Kingdom. So they obviously forget about other countries that speak English, like Malta, for example. Malta speaks
Yeah.
English and they do it very
Hmm.
good. Trinidad and Tobago, they speak English and it's good. So what are your thoughts on this one? Does the teacher has to be native? That's the first one.
No. No,
That's the
again,
first
I
one.
go back
And the
to
second one, and okay, and there is a third one that is even worse because they say that the teacher has to be that the teacher must have an English speaking passport, but it had to be born there. So for example, if I like in 2 years time I could go for my Irish citizenship if I wanted, But once I get my Irish passport, I won't qualify because I wasn't born here. So, what are your thoughts on that one? It happens a
Yeah,
lot if you look for job offers.
right. I think that it's unnecessary and it's just bureaucracy, dumb bureaucracy. Because the thought that comes to my head is Super Holly. You know who Super Holly is? Definitely, right? She was born in Mexico. She has an American passport, but she was born in Mexico. She's clearly a native speaker because her parents are American. So would she not qualify because she wasn't born in the US and she grew up in Mexico? It's a
Yeah,
little
for countries like Japan
ridiculous.
and South Korea, it won't. She won't.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't see the point of that rule.
All right. Very good. Very good. So these were the controversial questions we had for you today, Emma. So we have come to the end of this show. Thanks everybody for tuning in with us today. I just want
Thank
Emma's
you.
last words for both audiences. We are live at the moment in Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So what are
Yes.
your last words? My last words are just keep it up. Don't forget to include a daily routine. Don't forget that resources are free. You just have to go click on them or touch them if you're on tap the screen if you're on your phone. But don't forget your goals and go for them.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
like go and achieve them. You don't need. Hopefully, you get in touch with a teacher, with an academy.
Hmm.
Hopefully, us obviously, but it's not that you need it. You can do it on your own, but it would be definitely a slower process. So, what are your last words for
Yeah.
for your community and my community and everybody's
Yes.
community?
Yes. First of all, I would just thank everyone. Thank you for the support. Thank you for being here. And my reminder would be that practice makes better, never perfect. Don't focus on perfection. Don't focus on trying to be a native speaker. Focus on trying to speak better and know that there are many people out here like me, like Professor Henan, who will support you in the process. And if you can, invest in your language skills, invest time, find a course, find a teacher, because that will help you achieve your goals quicker and you'll always have that support system with you. And I think that the support system of a teacher and language partners is necessary in this process.
Very good, Emma. Just one last question that came through. It's about the standardized tests,
Okay.
IELTS, TOEFL, and all these. What's your advice on this? They keep on asking me if I certify my courses. I do, but I also have to be transparent and say that my certificate could go on the CV, and if you're looking for a private job, that might work, might depending on the employer. But the only thing that is really worth it, like to prove your level, is one of these tests. So
Mm-hmm.
what's your advice? What's the easiest one? I always say the FCE, for example, is kind of easier than IELTS, but it also depends on what they're looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what are your thoughts
Right.
about?
Yeah, my thoughts are that it's a necessary evil in this world, right? I think it's something that you have to do to certify your language level. However, it's something that will greatly benefit your your process, whatever your goal is. So I would say do enough research and know what your goal is. Why do you want to get certified and what's the way to get to that point, right? Find someone again to help you through that. Don't try to do it alone.
Perfect. Very good, lads. Now we're done. So thanks very much for tuning in.